Hi and welcome to Safe Driver Training. My name is William Grants and in this video we'll discuss variations to work time limits. Work Time and Logbook Rule 2007 provides a few situations where you can vary your normal work time limits. In following situations, you must get an approval from Nzta before they are needed. Sometimes you might need to make a short-term variation of normal work time restrictions to meet your business needs. These allow you to work more than 13 hours in a cumulative workday, but not more than 70 hours in cumulative work period. Also, it allows you to vary the timing of a rest breaks, so you don't need to take your rest break after 5.5 hours. Common examples are public events and agricultural harvests. The short-term variation must be approved before they are needed. It cannot be more than 14 days in duration. A copy of Nzta approval must be carried at all times. These variations can also apply to a tour bus drivers on specific routes. Meal breaks of at least 30 minutes must be scheduled. They count as a required break for each cumulative work day. Any approval granted will be issued in the name of the company and be specific to a tour which its variation applies and have an expiry date. The written approval of this variation must be carried by the driver at all times and produced to any enforcement officer on demand. A person who is in business as a farmer or any agricultural contractor may apply to Nzta for variation of normal work time limits for the purpose of critical agricultural operation. A critical agricultural operation means work that is required for an agricultural purpose that must be completed urgently to avoid the adverse impact of biological event, including a natural process such as crop becoming ready for harvest or change in weather conditions. New Zealand Defence Force or visiting forces in New Zealand may vary their work time hours. Specific rules apply for the regular Army and Territorial Force personnel. A driver of a vehicle operated by the New Zealand Defence Force or visiting forces in New Zealand may vary their work time hours provided that the terms and conditions set out in writing by New Zealand Transport Agency are complied with. A superior commander has authorized the variation for a specific deployment or exercise. The commanding officer or other person in command of that driver carries a copy of the terms and the conditions of the variation and produces it to an enforcement officer on demand. A person who is involved in scheduled territorial force training and who is subject to work time rules, of course, may vary their work time hours if the following criteria are satisfied. They have been engaged in a scheduled territorial force training or course conducted on a weekend, or at least 16 hours elapse between the conclusion of territorial force training and the commencement of other work duties. A person complying with the rules is deemed to be commencing a new cumulative work period on commencement of their other work duties. This variation cannot be used on 2 consecutive weekends. The next variation which we will discuss is an alternative fatigue management scheme. Anyone can apply for an alternative fatigue management scheme with Nzta. This variation scheme will allow the driver to vary or exceed their normal work time requirements as written in approval. But you must not use one unless it's been approved. An approval letter must be carried by the driver at all times. Work Time and Logbook Rule 2007 also provides a few situations where you can vary normal work time limits and you do not need to get a written approval from Nzta. If you drive an emergency service vehicle or work for a principal rural fire office, you might be required to extend your work hours but the dispatcher must consider other alternatives before asking you to work beyond standard work time limits in responding to a priority call. For example, the availability of other drivers, including those from other locations. Emergency services include fire service and volunteer firefighters, ambulance, including volunteer ambulance drivers, and police services. If you are required to drive an emergency service vehicle in response to a priority call, you may exceed your work time hours or defer your rest breaks. It means put it off until after the call out. After the call out, you can return the vehicle to emergency base and take any rest break that may have been put off. If your priority call has taken you beyond your work time hours, you must not do any further scheduled or routine driving work for the emergency services until you have taken the required 10 hours of rest time. Volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance drivers are not subject to work time limits when they are called out to attend or returning from priority call, even if they have worked a full day before the call out. Essential service drivers or essential service vehicles who might have to attend the emergency works can extend their work hours if requested by a manager or relevant authority to restore essential services. Essential service drivers include drivers who are employed by or work under the contract to road controlling authorities, territorial authorities, rail access providers, organizations that supply natural gas or electricity, and people working on emergency works to stabilize land or reduce risk to people or property. If you are called out to restore essential services, you will need to write the details in your logbook. This can also include if you are asked by New Zealand Police to provide urgent assistance to manage traffic in an incident or accident. When providing essential services, this table on a screen shows the circumstances under which essential service drivers can extend work time if requested to do so by the manager or relevant authority. Drivers need to keep evidence that they are required to perform the specific task and record the details in their logbook. You can pause this video to have a good look at this table. At the end of cumulative work day, during which work time hours have been extended to undertake the restoration of essential services, a driver may return the vehicle to a depot if the journey does not exceed 2 hours of driving, provided that 10 hours break is taken before undertaking any further driving that is subject to work time. If you and the vehicle that you are driving are being transported on a scheduled ferry trip, which takes longer than 1 hour, you can count this time spent on a ferry as the rest time. The actual ferry departure and arrival time must be recorded as the start and the end of rest time in your logbook. At the end of the crossing, even if you have exceeded your work time hours for the day, you can work for up to 1 more hour from the arrival time of the ferry to find a safe place to park your vehicle and take your 10 hours of rest time before starting work again. For more information of how to record scheduled ferry trip variation in your logbook, we have discussed it in a separate video in depth. Please watch it if you haven't done so before. Let's revise normal work time limits variations. In these examples, you must obtain the written approval from Nzta before exceeding normal work time limits. New Zealand Defence Force, driver over tour bus on a specific routes, short-term variation, critical agricultural operation, alternative fatigue management scheme. And these variation examples, you can exceed normal work time limits without written approval from Nzta. Ferry crossings of more than 1 hour, emergency services in response to priority calls, essential service vehicles drivers restoring essential services, in state of emergencies declared by civil defense, and you ask to work by controller or any member of police to carry out emergency response work. Now you know work time variations provided in the Work Time and Logbook Rule 2007. As always, safe driving to you.